Hi there, my name is Nikki Stanton, and today I'm going to be comparing dyslexias and dysgraphias. So first, to compare what the difference of them actually is, dyslexias involve difficulties in reading, and dysgraphias involve difficulties in writing. However, both, it's important to understand the processes of how we read and write, and there's two distinct processes going on where there's actually a whole word reading mechanism where you recognize a familiar word and then pronounce it almost automatically because you've just seen it so many times, which really helps with irregularly spelled words that don't follow the normal patterns that letters are associated to specific sounds, like words with a silent B, like debt, or yacht, that is the silent CH, etc. Words like that. Whereas phonetic reading is where you're actually sounding words out, and it helps with unfamiliar words, and it requires the recognition of individual letters and knowledge of the sounds they make. So now I want to talk about similarities between all dyslexias. They can actually all be tracked by eye movements. So people with dyslexia, when you look at it, they will fixate on spots longer while reading, have a shorter saccade length, meaning they don't move as far between fixations, and they exhibit more regressions. So they review and reread words that they've already read at a higher rate than the average person. So these people are looking at spots longer, moving shorter when they eventually do move from the spot, and moving a shorter distance, and they're having to constantly reread at a higher rate than normal people, which really speaks to the difficulty of living with this disorder and the frustrations that come along with it. So now I want to compare the various types of dyslexias. On the left, I've made them both in different colors to really illustrate how there's two separate branches of dyslexia. The first being acquired dyslexias, which are caused by damage to the brains of people who already know how to read. And there's three types of these. So these people were walking around completely fine, and then they could read perfectly fine, and some type of brain damage or injury resulted in them not being able to read properly and having this acquired dyslexia. And the first of those is surface dyslexia, and this is actually a deficit in whole word reading. So these people will make errors related to the appearance of words and pronunciation rules, although they can still understand meaning. But they must sound out every single word because they don't have that whole word ability to recognize whole words by themselves. So for this reason, they can easily pronounce words with regular spelling like hand, table, or chin, but it's really difficult for them to read irregularly spelled words like yacht and debt, for instance. And they can easily pronounce regularly spelled non-words, just as long as the spelling is correct. As long as there's no silent words, anything funky going on, they can read it. And they also really struggle understanding homophones unless they're in the context of a sentence, because they're really listening to their own pronunciation while reading, and that's all they're relying on. So they don't know the distinguishments between the spelling. And then lastly on that branch is going to be direct dyslexia. And the reason I put it last is because surface and phonological kind of counteract each other, the direct opposites of one another, whereas direct is kind of its own thing, where these people can read out loud, but they don't necessarily understand the meaning of the word. And they actually found this out because basically if you presented one of these words with, say, the word cat, they would be able to read it out loud, read the word cat when it's written down, but they're not able to associate it to a picture when it's presented to them. So if you're shown a picture of a cat, they won't be able to associate the letters C-A-T, the word, with that picture. On the other hand, developmental dyslexia is inheritable genetically, so they're not acquired in life, you're more or less born with it. And these reading difficulties become apparent in children, and they have difficulty rearranging sounds of words, and they struggle distinguishing the order of sequences of sounds. They struggle with spacing of words, and basically they cannot distinguish if you had a word that, say, for cat. They cannot distinguish that if you remove the first sound of the word cat, that you were just left with plain old at. They just really struggle with stuff like that. So now to compare all the acquired dyslexias, we have all of them tabulated here. And again, surface and phonological are right next to each other because they're pretty much polar opposites of each other. As you can see, surface dyslexia, poor whole word reading, but good phonetic reading, the complete opposite phonological dyslexia. But direct dyslexia, if you notice, they have good whole word reading and good phonetic reading, but the problem is that they just can't understand and associate those words that they're reading, which is a key difference between the other two. And then the far right of the table is going to show you a column that just shows all of the brain areas that are affected by each disorder, that cause each disorder. Now comparing types of dysgraphias. So there's only two types. Phonological dysgraphia is where you're unable to sound out words to spell them. So these people actually can't write unfamiliar words. So since they can't sound words out, they actually need to have been seen the word before since they can't really like sound it out exactly. Versus orthographic dysgraphia can only spell by sounding words out. So I put half equals half because when these people are spelling like an irregularly spelled word like half, it has an L in it, but there's no L sound, they'll typically spell that and write it HAFF because, since they don't have that other side of their writing ability, they just don't know that there's an L there. Finally, to wrap this all up, there was a case study by Hanley and Soteropoulos in 2018 where they found a case of an individual exhibiting surface dysgraphia without surface dyslexia. And this is a little surprising because we've noticed that dysgraphias typically accompany most dyslexias, but in this case, this is dysgraphia without dyslexia. So basically in this study, they asked the subject to read and spell. And for regular words and non-words that were spelled normally, so like for a non-word like glab, where all the letters make sense, they were pretty good at that. But when it came to writing irregularly spelled words like debt, they could still read them and understand them. And this is just further evidence of the association between impaired spelling and preserved reading. And then those are my references, and that is my presentation.